Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. Hey, I'm Alex Williams of the New Stack here at DockerCon, where we've done podcasts, we've had a great time, and here with Joe Jackson of the New Stack. Hey, Joe.
Hi. John, thank you for taking time to talk with us about Twistlock and DockerCon.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So now I understand that Twistlock version 2.0 is coming out, and we want to hear a bit more about that. But first, tell me, for those who are new to the container space, what is Twistlock?
So we provide a security suite for protecting your containers and the applications inside of them throughout their life cycle and across all the places they run. So basically we're doing vulnerability management, compliance, and then applying machine learning to learn what applications you have inside of your containers and how they behave, and then to protect them at runtime.
Excellent. Machine learning is to understand what the usual calls are and
yeah, exactly.
What the usual behavior is.
That's right. One of the unique things about containers that's a real opportunity from a security standpoint is the fact that with containers, we can look at the image that you're deploying into the container, and because it's very minimalistic and declarative, we can understand in a deterministic way what that image should do when you deploy it. For example, if you have an image that's going to run MySQL, for example, we can very clearly understand it's going to run MySQL-D, it's going to write to these file paths, it's going to listen on these ports. We create what we call a model that describes it across those dimensions, and then we monitor containers that are deployed using that image to look for anomalies relative to the model. And so the really cool thing with containers is that you can create these very application-tailored security policies without having to go in and manually set up the rules. Like the machine, the software can do that for you.
Oh, nice, nice. And in terms of your customer base or potential customer base, is this, are these enterprises, mid-level businesses, or how would you characterize?
So we've been really, one of the things we're really most proud of is we've got well over 50 enterprise customers that are paying customers, not people just doing evals. We've got many more of those that hopefully will become customers in the future. But those customers, so I think there's some surprise to people that the great majority of our customers are what you consider to be like large organizations and enterprises. People that are like Fortune 100 organizations, large government agencies, military divisions, and so forth that are using containers in ways that a lot of people don't really necessarily expect. A lot of people think containers are something that Netflix and Uber and people like that are the ones using, but I mean we have large healthcare providers that are using us. We have large traditional discrete manufacturers, a lot of financial services companies, a lot of well-known government agencies, and they're using containers really to improve the efficiency of the way that they create and they iterate their software, and they're using Twistlock to help make sure that that's being done in a way that protects their patients' data, their citizens' data, their corporate financial data, and containers really are having a big impact in their ability to kind of transform themselves into being much more of a software-driven company than they have historically been.
Excellent, excellent. And Twistlock itself, the platform, is this I would imagine this is enterprise software. Is this a service or?
Yeah, we're enterprise software, but myself and most of the team, we come from very much a security background, and so we've built the product in a way that's really focused on the needs, balancing the needs between the developers and the security teams in a way that's really enterprise centric. So as an example, we provide our software just as a set of Docker images that you can deploy using a daemon set and Kubernetes or a Docker global service to your agents, whatever it may be. But at the same time, we really make sure that we're valuing our customers' privacy and the security rules they have. So for example, no data that the customer has is ever shared with us. Some of the first customers we had were actually intelligence community customers that run us in completely air-gapped networks in which there's no connectivity to the internet, so that we even have designed ways that they can update their vulnerability and threat data that we use in a completely sort of sneaker net way without having to be connected to our cloud service at all. But for most customers, they download our images, they run them in their own environment, which might be in AWS or Azure, it might be on site. It doesn't really matter to us. We've really built a the product to be container-centric, not like environment-specific.
Ah, nice. And this is primarily runtime protection, or is there also ways to work it into the development cycle as well?
Both, really. So we kind of look at it as a life cycle. If you think at the beginning of that life cycle, some of the capabilities we have there are like literally as soon as you start building your images with Jenkins, we have plugins for Jenkins and other CI tools that allow you to show your developers in the same tools that they use to do their build jobs, all the vulnerability state of the images that they're building, but even more importantly, to actually be able to actively create these quality gates that say if a build contains vulnerabilities that meet a threshold, like medium or higher severity CVEs, fail the build and force the developer to go back and fix it so that you're preventing those problems before they ever progress down the pipeline and expose you to more risk and are more expensive operationally to go and correct. And really the whole philosophy of the product is to give you, the knowledge and the integration so that as that pipeline goes from development to, basically that build, ship, run mentality with Docker goes from development to like whatever registry you push it into, into the actual deployment with an orchestrator, we're giving you the visibility but also control. So you can ensure that only images that contain vulnerabilities that are acceptable to you and that have compliance rules that meet your baselines are allowed to actually be provisioned.
Nice. Now, how did the company get started? Did you guys really get started as focusing on containers to begin with, or?
Yeah, we were like the first container security pure play, I guess. So we've been around for about 2 years now. The two co-founders, Ben and Oedema, my friends from Microsoft days. Ben and I both worked at Microsoft for about 14 years. Sure. Oedema was working the Israeli Development Center at Microsoft for a long time. So a lot of people with a lot of like real long-term sort of enterprise security backgrounds. Oedema and Liran, our lead architect, had a lot of work in machine learning. They worked on Cortana, for example, at Microsoft. Right. So really apply a lot of those skills to really help us automate stuff that used to be hard from a security standpoint, and use those characteristics of the way the containers work to automate that and to make those things that used to be hard much less manual and much less sort of a friction point as you deploy your applications. By applying that machine learning, we can create those models and those rules automatically, so you as a developer just focus on building your app and the software understands how the app should work and how to protect it.
Excellent. I'm kind of curious about the using of the machine learning. How is there a as a administrator for an enterprise, how do I got these containerized apps, I know what they do. How much learning, how much training, how does that work? How does that whole ML part work?
So the neat thing with us is that we don't require that you take special steps for us to learn about your application. Like literally, when you deploy your application, because we have one of our what we call a Defender, which is our containerized software that runs on the host that you run your containers on. When that Defender sees a new image that's been deployed, we already have kind of the baseline model that we've been able to do via static analysis. When we do that CI integration or we scan your image on a registry, we do static analysis to learn like what is the entry point for that image, what processes it should run, what are the checksums of those processes, and so forth. And then we supplement that static analysis with that behavioral machine learning at runtime to say, as the image is actually deployed, what are other things that it does? Like, for example, does it have other processes that sort of help the main process, unzip data or access a key or whatever it might be? Yeah. And so we look at all that stuff, add that to the model so that your model is comprehensive and really describes all the things that are required for your app to work. And then the other thing that we do is we allow you to tune the model such that if, like, let's say you have a process that runs only once every 3 days or something. So when we go through that learning period, the learning mode we have is usually about an hour of cumulative runtime for a given image. But if you have something that doesn't execute for another like 3 days after that, you might not catch that in that learning mode. And so we allow you to supplement these models with what we call rules, which have all the same dimensions as models do. But models are always system generated and not something that you edit as a customer, whereas a rule allows you to have all the customization. So you can explicitly allow or explicitly deny things in a rule. And then when we calculate the effective policy at runtime, we say what is explicitly allowed in the model plus what's explicitly allowed in the rule minus whatever is explicitly denied in the rule, and that gives you the resultant effective model for that particular application. The cool thing though is in all of our customer deployments, what we see is about 95% of the time the models themselves are sufficient for protecting the application. Like, you don't have to go and tune them further. So the value for you as a customer is if you can go and say, like, out of the 100 apps that I have, I only really have to have 5 rules that tune like these kind of edge case scenarios. Everything else is automatically maintained by my security software. And every time I create a new version of the application, Twistlock generates a unique model that's calculated for that specific build. That's got the the checksums of the binaries that I just built. It's got the configuration for that specific image. And so every time I do a build, build, I'm getting a customized security policy built for that particular application's version.
Nice, nice. And it doesn't sound like you guys would get, the software would get a lot of false positives.
No, we've really done a lot of work. In fact, that's probably one of the biggest areas of work that we do is to try to tune that out. We want to make sure that what we show you as a customer is real legitimate anomalies, things that are not expected because they're not normal behaviors within a container. So there's some application scenarios that are containerized that are more difficult and sort of troublesome than others. Like as an example, one place that we continue to do work on is Jenkins. If you run Jenkins in a container, think about your typical Jenkins builds. You might have, let's say out of 5 different builds, each one of those 5 builds might do different things. They call different binaries or different tools. And so Jenkins tends to be one of those things that may be a little bit more difficult to model accurately depending on how you use it. So there's definitely no silver bullet to it, but like if we can continue to drive down that number of rules that you have to create by being smarter about it and kind of tuning the way that the models are built and change the learning intervals and so forth, our ultimate goal is to the point where like you have to do virtually nothing manually and everything is done through system intelligence and the knowledge that we have of those applications natively.
Nice, nice. And how do the security admins or the admins get the alerts when something when something is flagged?
So our whole product, we have a web UI that you can look at and obviously interact with and visualize. We have a lot of really good visualizations. That's one of the big features we have in 2.0 is effectively we build this dynamic Visio of your network that shows all the containers and pods and services and the connectivity between each of them and describes like vulnerability state, compliance state for those. So there's very much an interactive element to it. But also every click in our product is backed by a REST-based API. So it's really easy to get data in, to pull data out, to push configuration state in. So everything is very much automatable via this API that we have documented and available on our support site. But also, again, getting back to the enterprise security background, all the data that we collect, we also emit via standard RFC compliant syslog. So whatever sort of SIM tools that you already have, or even sort of like kind of an advanced logging tools like Sumo or Splunk or whatever it may be, you can consume all that data into those tools and do your logging and ticketing and alerting based on the same tools you already invested in. We don't want to recreate that and have like another dashboard that you have to look at and view.
Terrific, terrific. All right, so what's new with Twistlock 2.0? What are some of the main features? Yeah.
So there's basically, I would say there's 2 feature areas that like everybody seems to find really compelling as they come by our booth. The first one is that view that I talked about earlier called Runtime Radar, where we take all that knowledge we have about your images, all the runtime models we have, and we dynamically display them on this graph. Imagine like a Visio. Every time you deploy your app, you literally see a Visio that describes like this front end talks to this cache, talks to this backend database. It uses these ports. Basically describes the way that the application works in a way that's very visual and understandable. We also overlay that though so that all those pods or services or containers you see, they're color coded by severity state. So I can very easily look at that map and say like, hey, do I have a new CVE that impacts some component of my application? Do I need to reprovision some image to fix that, right? So that view and being able to see all that information is really valuable. But the really cool thing is you can also export all that model, how everything is connected to each other, what the desired parts are, and import that into your orchestrator to then be enforced by the networking plugins that your orchestrator has. So think, for example, if you're running on Kubernetes, you can download this policy, upload it into Kubernetes, and of course that can be automated via the API. And then plugins like Weave and Calico can then provide layer 3 enforcement of that policy set. So it's really a container aware, like an application centric container aware firewall that we're telling your firewall tools like what are the right rules to put in place based on the application so that you don't have to manually configure all these rules yourself.
Nice.
So that radar view and being able to feed that into the configuration of your networking plugins, that's a big feature area and probably one of the bigger things we have. The second feature that a lot of people like in 2.1 is what we call Compliance Explorer. So especially like a lot of our customers are financial services and government organizations, healthcare. They have to be compliant with PCI and HIPAA. You may have seen last week that NIST released the first draft of a special publication on the Container Security Guide. It's NIST SP 800-190.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like really a good sort of watershed moment in container world because it's a standard, a government standard about how to secure your containers and what are the best practices for that. And we were honored to really be one of the participating authors in creating that standard. For each one of those, what we've done is we've taken all of the Docker CIS benchmark checks that are available, 90 some odd checks. We also support OpenSCAP, so you can create your own custom checks, and then allow you to have across the entire life cycle of your images, containers, and hosts, the ability to not just monitor your compliance, but again, to actively enforce it. So with Twistlock, you can say like, I have a rule that I want to prevent the deployment of any container that runs as root into my production environment.
Right.
And so you can not only see how many containers are compliant, but also be able to actively prevent those that aren't. And what we do with Compliance Explorer is give you a view of that data that's really consumable by somebody who's an internal auditor or a security pro, maybe not a deep container expert. They know what's important in your organization from a compliance standpoint, and then go to this view that's basically gas gauges that says, how percent compliant am I of my hosts, of my images, of my containers, and then every one of those checks that you've defined, we show for that particular check. How compliant am I? What is my trend over the past 30, 60, 90 days? So that your auditors and other people that participate in QA can really easily see where do you stand with compliance in your organization.
Excellent. I know the enterprise. You need the compliance. You need to kind of link into the existing mechanisms again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for auditing and regulation, stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, terrific. And by the time this podcast runs, Twistlock will have already had some funding news.
Absolutely.
Another round of funding.
Correct.
And I guess the question is, what are you going to do with the money? How are you going to invest it? How are you going to expand the company?
Well, I mean, we're very much an engineering-driven organization and really take a lot of pride in the quality of what we build and what we're doing with that. So I think there's really two ways. One of them is that we want to really continue to invest from an R&D standpoint in learning as much as we can about the apps that you run in your containers and automating the ways that we protect those applications by sort of leveraging the native capabilities of the container ecosystem. Like how much can we do through the orchestrator and can we do through the process that you go for CI to build things so that we want to kind of take all that friction that traditionally exists of like, I build an app as a developer, I have to tell you as a security person, like, here's how to protect it. It runs on this port, it talks to this database. That's all these friction points that oftentimes people they kind of throw up their hands. They don't really protect their apps, they protect the perimeter of their network. We want to make it really easy for your apps to always have the protection that they need through doing this applied machine learning about the application and providing those rules automatically. So that's one big area. The second big area, of course, is like we got to get that in the hands of the customers, right? So we want to make sure we're really getting it out there and being able to have more like really good sales engineering roles. People that's something we've done, I think, a really good job of so far is making sure that we can help our customers use the product productively, understand its capabilities, get it running, get it functional in their environments, and really make sure that the product is tuned in the way that they need. As a product owner, probably the most thing that I'm most proud of for us is if you look at over the past 9 major releases we've had, about 60% of the features that we've ever shipped have been marked as customer requirements. We really want to be very responsive to building things that customers care about and solve real problems for them. And I think you'll see both of those trends continue, even hopefully ramp up with the additional funding.
Excellent. And so we're here at DockerCon, and this week there was a number of Docker had a number of new projects come out, Moby, that will tie together different container components, and also Linux Kit. And part of the pitch that Docker is making for both of these is this will help in security. This will help if you want to secure Linux kernel, then you could put it right into Linux Kit. And it was directed mostly at system builders such as yourself. And was there anything this week in any of the announcements that struck you as interesting or useful for Twistlock?
Well, I think the whole idea that they're taking with Moby of basically decomposing all these other pieces that are used to sort of assemble the end result that most people think of as Docker. I think it's a architecturally very elegant approach. It's a really positive thing from an open source standpoint. It really is going to unlock a lot of opportunities for people to improve those individual components, to really integrate containers more broadly into different places. And honestly, I think what you're going to see is that today Docker is very much a sort of a data center way to deliver server applications. I think there's a real potential that you'll see a lot more use cases, potentially even maybe even in mobile down the line, but certainly for like IoT scenarios and scenarios where people may not be using containers today because they didn't have the underlying foundation to support that. So I think to me at least the biggest announcement from DockerCon so far is really about taking the entire framework of stuff that supports what people think of as Docker and to hopefully distributing that out, making that available enough so that it can be used in a lot of different ways, people aren't even thinking about today.
Excellent, terrific. All right, those are the questions I had. Are there any other aspects you think might be worth mentioning to somebody listening in who cares about containers and security?
I think it's definitely an exciting time. There's a lot of stuff that's going on, and I guess for us the most gratifying part of this DockerCon is just seeing the growth in the number of people that are not just interested in Docker, but actually using it in mission critical ways. I mean, like it's been very obvious from DockerCon in 2015 to 2016 to 2017. Like it's unambiguous how much change there is and how much real real mission critical apps people are deploying on Docker.
Excellent. All right, John, thank you so much for taking time to talk.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
Hello, this is Joe Jackson, and you are here at another edition of the Makers Podcast. This week we're at DockerCon in Austin, Texas, and I'm with Liz Rice of Aqua Security.
Hi, Joe. Hi.
Hello.
Nice to be here.
Well, thank you for taking time to talk.
Great. I mean, it's such a busy show, but I'm really happy to, take a bit of time out and have a chat.
Excellent. Terrific. Well, I'm glad you're here because container security, it's a tricky subject. It's not quite the same as regular IT security. And you had a talk at this year's DockerCon, a really successful, widely attended talk on names. What have namespaces done for you lately?
Yeah, I did. It did go very well. I basically live coded a container in a few lines of Go to illustrate what namespaces are and what C groups are. And since I'm now working for a security company, Aqua Security, I thought it would be kind of fun to set off a security exploit inside my home-built container. So I ran a fork bomb, which was successfully contained, which is a result.
Let's delve into that. Well, first of all, let's talk about the exploit, and then let's talk about how it was mitigated. What is a fork bomb?
So fork bombs look really cryptic because they're a shell script made entirely out of punctuation characters. Okay. So they look kind of fun, and all it does is it's a process that spawns another process that spawns another. So just you're spawning ideally an unlimited number of processes. But what I showed in my talk yesterday was how you can use control groups, C groups, to limit the number of processes that a container is allowed to use. Okay. So my example was 20. The fork bomb sets off 20 processes, and at that point it can't do any more harm. So although the container is screwed by the fork bomb, the rest of the host is basically unaffected.
I knew about the ability to limit the number of processes through C groups. Is this something that's widely done today?
I would say probably not widely done, and it also requires a certain version of the Linux kernel. I don't remember exactly which version, but for a lot of companies, particularly enterprises, they might be running older versions of the kernel, but fortunately there are other ways of mitigating them, and Aqua Security is one way of we have an ability to monitor the number of processes even on an older kernel.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, well, tell me about Aqua Security. You had just signed on a few months back after microservices. What is their... I know they're a container-focused security company, but what is their deal? How did they come about? What are they doing? What are they offering?
So the team is headquartered in Tel Aviv, and there's there's some really good in-depth security backgrounds amongst the team.
CA and Intel.
Yeah, right. And there are some experts there. I've been really impressed with some of the knowledge in the team. And we look after container security sort of all the way through the lifetime. So from assuring the image that you build, and it's really important to build security in early on. Right. So if we think about the container lifecycle and how it fits with DevOps, it's no longer the case that a developer gives security, here's my finished product, I would like you to bless it. Right. Now we need to sort of check for security issues really early on in the lifecycle, so we can hook into a CI/CD pipeline to automate that process. So that's kind of the build side of it. What I find really exciting is more the runtime profiling that we do.
All right.
And I think I find this really interesting because it hadn't really crossed my mind as a developer before. But if you have a running container, particularly if it's microservices, it's much easier to reason about what that container should be allowed to do.
You would think, yeah.
And, you know, so for example, if you've got a microservice that's supposed to be looking up product information for product search, if that starts trying to access a user database, there's something wrong. You know, it's kind of obvious that there's something that he's looking at. And you can't really do that if you've got a monolithic application. But when you've broken things down into containers, there's so many more opportunities to sort of look at what the attack surface would be and contain it.
Now, is that a labor for the developer? Is that kind of a labor-intensive process? Don't you have to characterize what the app should be doing?
We have a really nice console for doing that, so you can profile the container while it's running, and it looks at what resources it uses and what user IDs it uses and that kind of thing, what network traffic it produces, and you can look at that profile and say, yes, that is normal behavior for this container. That's what I want to see, that and only that from this particular container. And we're working on making that an even more automated, sort of an intelligent process.
Nice. And this component of the offer, or what you guys are offering, this is a runtime component. Does it come in its own container?
It does. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We deliver the code as containers. So you deploy some Aqua services into your cluster through whatever orchestration system you're using, whether it's Docker Swarm or Kubernetes or OpenShift, or we're orchestration agnostic, and we also have an agent that gets deployed on every node in the cluster, and that's doing sort of some very smart stuff to monitor what's going on inside each of the running containers. Excellent.
And does that have any sort of overhead for the whole, I guess you would call it the whole distributed application?
It's funnily enough, that question came up just like a few minutes ago, and it's something I don't know the details of. I'm sure it is not, it's not been observable to me as a casual user, but what I really want to do is find out what the numbers are.
All right.
Yeah, so I'll get back to you on that.
Sure. Excellent, terrific. And this, what you were talking, a colleague of yours actually posted something for the new stack earlier today. In fact.
Svi, yeah.
And he had characterized the I guess development process as DevSecOps. Is this what you're talking about, like putting this into when you're in a development process, actually including security into the build process?
That's right. And they touched in the general sessions this morning at DockerCon on how enterprises culture is changing. The sort of the way that containers affect. It's been called DevOps, and security is now part of that. For enterprises, security is, it's key, it's essential.
Yeah.
So DevSecOps is a good way of coining how in, one continuous pipeline, we need to look at the development and the security and the operations deployment, all as holistically. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Terrific. So where is Aqua Security or Aqua Sec in terms of the customer base, the market audience? Are you aiming at the enterprise, the mid-sized business, or?
Yeah, it's primarily enterprise customers that we have, and there are some big names. We've had a packed schedule here. It's really interesting to compare, the kind of people that are coming to DockerCon now and the stage they're at. There are enterprises really, they have real, genuine, I want to deploy my containers and I want to know they're secure. How can you help, Aqua? And they're knocking on the door asking for meetings. So, we have a packed schedule, and that's fantastic.
Nice. So, I was talking with Fintan, actually, from Red Monk, and he was saying that the average age of the attendee this year at DockerCon, it seems to be about 5 years older than it was. Well, both.
We've all aged 5 years in the last year.
That's true. But beyond that, though, he thought that this suggests that this year's DockerCon seems to be more of an enterprise-oriented audience. It sounds like you're finding that to be true.
I would say anecdotally, yes, absolutely agree. Yes, and that's a really interesting statistic about the older attendees.
So terrific. So now, Docker. Today they made a lot of announcements. They have new partnerships with HPE and Microsoft, and Oracle is providing their software. And so you're seeing, I guess, a move on the part of Docker towards more towards meeting the demands of the enterprise customer.
Totally seems that way to me. Yeah, and it makes sense. That's how they're going to make their business successful. So yeah.
Excellent. Terrific.
And I guess, for the rest of us in the ecosystem, it's also important that they succeed.
All right, fantastic. So now for the average security administrator who might be new to containers, they might have a test project or something coming up. And they're like, oh, how do I secure this? What are some of the? You certainly have some tips for them in terms of what are some easy things you can do to at least get a handle on container security.
Yeah, okay. There are some well-documented sort of best practices around how you build your container image. So doing things like not running as root unless you absolutely have to.
All right.
Minimizing the set of code that you have inside an image, which is good for performance as well as security because you have a reduced attack surface. I think another thing that is maybe not quite so, there's no fix sort of straight out of the box.
Sure.
Well, with the possible exception of Docker Swarm, is secrets management. So one of the things that I talked about in my talk yesterday was how environment variables are visible from the host. So even your container has some environment variables, and so if you do have some kind of exploit that gets onto the host, it can read environment variables out of all the containers.
Now so when you say environmental variables, you mean like here's the location of this file, or here's this password, or
it's passwords and certificates, that kind of things that we're worried about. So 12-factor apps teaches people to pass configuration information as environment variables, and Aqua, we have a nice solution to say rather than passing the secret value, the password itself, or certificate, you can store that in a secrets store, something like Amazon KMS or HashiCorp Vault, and then rather than you pass the key to the secret rather than the actual secret value, and then the Aqua agent will look up the value, as it's needed, write it into the container in memory so that what's written to disk and what the host can see is only the key and not the actual value.
It seems like a good idea in general, not just for containers.
Well, yes, I think that's an interesting point.
Terrific. All right, fantastic. Any other thoughts about DockerCon or container security, or what's happening out there in the world?
Well, it's really exciting to see, Docker containerization in general moving into the mainstream. Who thought we'd see Oracle on stage this morning? It's definitely an industry that's growing up.
Definitely. All right, fantastic. Well, Liz, thank you for taking some time and catching us up on the latest, and definitely keep us apprised as Aqua moves forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right.
Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here at DockerCon. Amir, good to see you.
Good meeting you, Alex.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and Aporeto.
I'm one of the co-founders of Aporeto, and Aporeto is a cloud-native security company. We're currently in stealth mode, but we've made a lot of progress in the market in the last year, even though we're stealth.
Good. Well, we've been following you guys, and you guys have been in our podcast before, and one of the topics that we're interested in discussing more is this story about security and containers, right? Container security. But you have a thought, your thought process is a little bit more sophisticated. Can you explain kind of your perspective on it from that container perspective?
Well, I'll take the compliment, and I'll give you my perspective anyway. The first question is, why are containers becoming a development thing right now?
Right.
And ultimately, it's about speed of delivery of applications. So containers allow a faster delivery of software features, and they're useful to the business. Therefore, it's actually a business driver that is driving container adoption within IT circles inside enterprises. Now, it is the business that's mandating these changes. Containers are serving business needs, therefore it's critical to provide security for containers. It's business security at the end of the day.
Right. Right. So it's business security at the end of the day. And we know that the security is much more in people's consciousness. But when you have speed, that doesn't always mean, you're going to actually be as careful about things often. I mean, that historically has been, is always an issue, right? If you speed things up too fast, you can start doing things that you might be cutting corners. So how does, with security and containers, how do you, mitigate those kinds of problems? Like, what is it about containers that allows you to create some, some isolations that actually improves the security in itself?
Well, if you apply old techniques to new technology, you're going to run faster, but you're going to run less safe.
Right.
An analogy would be you have a bicycle, you wear a bicycle helmet, you're doing all right. You put a motor on a bicycle, and you still wear the same bicycle helmet, you're not safe anymore.
Right.
But that doesn't preclude the possibility of being able to run faster and run safer at the same time.
Right.
The problem that we're having with container security today is that we're applying old world techniques to containers. So we're taking a lot of point solutions for either encryption, for segmentation, for enforcement, and we're forcing vendors to adopt these point solutions and duct tape them together into very complex solution sets that actually create more security risk at the end of the day.
So what are those point solutions, for example, that pose that risk?
So let's talk about segmentation, for example. You have, at the networking layer, you have access control lists, you have SDN solutions. Both are fairly complex in the sense that you have to recalculate rules very frequently, and you have to have a central controller. That works well at small scales, where environments don't change very well. But when you have a containerized workload where containers pop up and down, the speed of change has increased tremendously on the network topology. And that sort of complex network doesn't work very well. Now, scale this out across multiple availability zones, let's say on Amazon, and a backport to your private data center somewhere in the Midwest, let's say. Coordinating all those assets to have the same consistent rules across the board in an automated fashion is near impossible.
Right.
And that's what creates the security risk for it.
Right. Right. So the segmentation is one issue. What are some other major issues that you see that are old world practices that are being being adopted that shouldn't be?
So a lot of let's talk about secrets management, for example.
Right.
So what do people do for secrets management? There are various tools. Various cloud vendors have their own proprietary solutions, and a lot of developers either have to compile in a library that allows them to use some sort of secret management, and that's actually hard to do. And when you force developers to do that, you're basically forcing them to do things that they may not be familiar with.
Right.
That creates risk, and oftentimes developers get sloppy, and they store keys and clear text on GitHub, for example, or they're just checking a certificate that's available to everybody. So even though you're securing the environment with let's say, some decent, what would be decent secret management tools, the way they're used, because they're not automated, and their level of proficiency by the audience is low, that creates additional security risks. So what you ultimately want to do for that solution is have the infrastructure take over and automate that solution for you.
So what are the automation techniques then?
Well, that's something that we at Aporeto we're hoping to do. Basically, we are hoping that our design is to understand the application context. What is the application doing? And there's a lot of metadata around the application that describes it. And that can become a blueprint for what the application ought to be doing at runtime.
There's lots of approaches to that. We're seeing companies like try to scan everything inside the container, right?
Correct.
There's companies that are looking kind of like almost creating a backdoor into the kernel, in some respects to try to see inside the container. What is your guys' approach?
So our approach is one of authentication and authorization. By authentication, I mean having an identity for every application component, defined and cryptographically signed. By authorization, I mean the policy lookup. So for example, Trireme, our open source solution, uses Kubernetes metadata to assign identity to each pod or to each container that's spawned by Kubernetes, and uses the Kubernetes networking policies as a policy for managing connections between any two components. So in our approach, you don't have to have any SDN or any ACLs. Everything's theoretically on a flat network, or can be on a flat network, if container A is not authorized to talk to container B or to resource B, basically that connection never gets initiated. Our enforcement layer stops it before the two containers talk to each other.
So the enforcement layer is kind of the key there, and the authorization layer, authorization that's part of that.
Exactly.
Right. So there's traditional authorization techniques that, that have been used in the past, right? What are the new authorization techniques that are emerging that you guys are a proponent of?
Well, there is a lot of certificate management for basically assigning cryptographic identity. There is OAuth, a lot of OAuth techniques that are pretty good.
Right.
We use the metadata associated with a process or a container as the basis for identity. We then sign it cryptographically, and we add some salt or a nonce in there to prevent replay or man-in-the-middle attacks. So we have looked at existing technologies, and we have put a spin on them. We haven't reinvented the wheel, but we have iterated to make it better in order for a certificate to be automatically generated and govern connection between the two different entities that are talking on the network. And with that randomization with a nonce in there, we're stopping a replay attack, so an imposter can go in with an already used certificate and impose and get access to privileged data.
So it's the parser then plays a big role.
Pardon me?
You said the parser?
The imposter.
The imposter.
So,
I was like,
so you can't, an imposter cannot.
I see.
Cannot pretend to be, cannot get access to old data.
Right. And that's a technique that the attackers have used traditionally, isn't it?
That's correct.
Right.
By stealing identity, I mean, credit card theft is a good example of that. By stealing somebody else's identity and posing as them, you get unauthorized access to their accounts.
What are the threats that open up? What are the threats that open up if you are, using these new techniques? What are some of the exposure that you need to be thinking about as you're kind of developing your own platform?
So, our philosophy is that the less the developer has to do in terms of securing the application, the better he is, assuming that the infrastructure is secure. And so our goal is to bake security into the infrastructure in an automated way. Now, with that, the risk is that we could get something wrong, and that's part of the reason why we have open source part of our enforcement layer, so that the world sees the code and examines it and mitigates the risk. And ultimately, you can't ever make a 100% foolproof house, but you can increase security by being transparent about what you're doing and allowing people to inspect it and giving basically a whirl. That's why we open sourced a good portion of our solution.
So, but then what other precautions do you have to take on top of that? So to make sure that you're keeping that, so you're minimizing that window as much as possible.
So the part of it is dependent on the organization itself. So when writing an application, you have to be clear about what that application can consume. So you have to write good rules. Basically, it's hygiene that when you talk to certain people, you don't disclose everything about yourself.
Right.
It's the same thing with an application, making sure that when you're describing the application behavior, there's sufficient metadata to govern its policies. At the organizational level, you want to have policies such as anytime any traffic goes over the internet, we want to have encrypted traffic, because you have to assume that you are really in a zero trust environment.
Right. Amir, thank you very much for taking some time to talk. I really appreciate it.
Alex, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Fun.
I appreciate it.
Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcast. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.